23 August 2022, episode 40 of this and that and what a fuck. Well, in this one, the focus is on Ukraine, but there are some other snippets. And the first one is this: President of Russia Vladimir Putin addressed to participants and guests on the 10th Moscow Conference on International Security. The situation in the world is changing dynamically, and the outlines of a multipolar world order are taking shape. An increasing number of countries and peoples are choosing a path of free and sovereign development based on their own distinct identity, traditions, and values. These objective processes are being opposed by the Western globalist elites, who provoke chaos, fanning long-standing and new conflicts, and pursuing the so-called containment policy, which in fact amounts to the subversion of any alternative sovereign development options. Thus, they are doing all they can to keep hold on the hegemony and power that are slipping from their hands. They are attempting to retain countries and peoples in the grip of what is essentially a new colonial order. Their hegemony means stagnation for the rest of the world and for the entire civilization. It means obscurantism, cancellation of culture, and new liberal totalitarianism. Now that is quite a mouthful, and I would suggest that you pause the video and read through it slowly and just think about what he's saying. This was the first time that Putin made a speech in which he directly addressed these, what he called globalists, new colonial order, and he is not pulling punches. Fact of the matter is, whether you like it or don't like it, the days of the Western Empire is done. They made a hell of a mistake in Ukraine. They miscalculated and they underestimated Russia to their own peril. Now the European economies are collapsing, the American economy is struggling, the NATO group has been basically effectively disarmed, and America has also depleted all their excess stock of armaments and ammunition. And still, they're looking for shit with Russia. And this from Shoigu. Many people in Ukraine have not accepted the policy of Kiev authorities to rehabilitate Nazism and incite hatred towards everything connected with Russia. Official Kiev has openly declared itself heir and successor to the cause of the bloody Ukrainian nationalists. The Verkhovna Rada has proclaimed fighters of Ukrainian insurgent army as fighters for national independence. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, everything was done in Washington to turn Ukraine into the antipode of Russia. The promotion of legislation banning the Russian language, Russian media, Russian culture, everything related to our country was encouraged. Many in Ukraine did not accept such a policy. And yes, the West stirred that pot properly. And they thought they were building there a wonder weapon with which to take over Russia. And boy, did they underestimate themselves. Well, have Western sanctions against Russia failed? Such a question was asked by a columnist of the American magazine National Interest. He identified three main reasons. 1. Competent currency policy of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation. The ruble has not turned into ruins, as Biden said in March, but has become one of the strongest world currencies. 2. Parallel import. Russia continues to receive all sanctioned Western goods, and the departed firms have been replaced by successor companies with almost identical goods. The impossibility of isolating Russia. The great economic powers of the world not only refused to join the sanctions the regime imposed by Washington, but also continue to deepen their trade and financial ties with Moscow. And that is the reality. And that is something that cabal of newcons, warmongers sitting in the shithouse in Washington does not want to hear. And this is just a tweet. It was in response to a tweet where the RS-28 Samad ICBM missiles were discussed. From Russia, it will take 1 minute 46 seconds to reach Berlin, 2 minutes to attack Paris, 2 minutes 2 seconds to destroy the UK, 18 minutes to destroy New York State. One single Samad ICBM can destroy the size of France, 551,000 square kilometers. That is fucking scary shit, that. And there was the tweet said, painted on one of them, give Russia peace and Russia will give peace to you. There is big shit brewing for the collective West if they don't get their act together and change their tune. And this little map is just for information. And it's for all of those that think NATO can take on Russia or America can take on Russia. For those guys that live in that fantasy world, here is the facts. A clear illustration of who Russia is fighting in Ukraine. And look at that. Those are the countries that are fighting against Russia. And they are losing, hands down. This image is just something I'm not going to discuss it for clear reasons. You can read it and check. There's lots of posts about this, but obviously it's never discussed by the mainstream. And then we get to this cretin. George Soros described the reasons for the situation in Ukraine literally in 2 sentences. We have a fund in Ukraine and it turned out to be one of the best. I also want to mention that there is one person who has been very deeply involved in Ukraine, and that is Biden. And the American legal system seems to me totally impotent against Biden. And then comes this gem from that Zatsy Zelensky. Ukraine will not negotiate with Russia only if it leaves all the territories currently occupied by Russian troops. And I've got a message for him. Dream on. And here, the face in the picture is more important. Confident leader of the nation, without any mental problems, Zelensky's facial expression and gesture at a press conference after negotiations with Erdogan. Now, there are people that say that Erdogan meeting in Kiev was a meeting for the sake of a meeting, and there are other commentators who said Erdogan went to Kiev specifically to give Zelensky a message from Putin. And it seems to me, if you look at this photograph here, Erdogan has whispered in this guy's ear what Putin is going to do to him. Nothing was achieved in this trilateral meeting in Lviv. The drug addict was not willing to agree on anything. UN is a joke and should be dismantled. Now, I also have my doubts about the UN in its current format. Now, here is a little bit of information that refers to that, I'm going to call it the gacha, fake setup, theater. It was done there in March, April, and now we have this. A woman from Irpin is accused for negating the claims of the supposed crimes of and violence of the Russian servicemen against the civilian population. Most probably having witnessed the situation in Irpin firsthand in her private phone conversations with other Ukrainian citizens, she was expressing her opinion that no Russian war crimes actually took place, and she faces persecution for telling that. And what else and what more can you expect from that Zatsy regime in Kiev? And then there's this gems from Arestovich, nicknamed the Goebbels of Ukraine. And I've read, it seems to me he's been fired out of his position. He has now got plans to stand for president. They simply don't have it. Arestovich in an interview with Israel's Best Radio. According to Goebbels of Ukraine, the West simply does not have the weapons to transfer to Kiev. We cried for this artillery, they would have given it, but they don't. It's the Americans. The European countries have a little better artillery because they are not so good with aviation, but it's also all for recalculation. And then there's a comment under that, so basically you are fucked. Well, I would guess so. They have disarmed the West. And then there's this little tidbit. Bulgaria tried to secretly supply Ukraine with defective artillery shells. It became known that members of the Bulgarian government tried to send several batches of artillery shells of various calibers to Ukraine, but they did not reach the front. The Ukraine and the Romanian transit sites were dissatisfied with the quality of the products supplied. Most of the shells were rusty, deformed and damp, and the contract for the delivery cost $200 million. Somebody made some money for nothing. And then we have this. Yeah, well, the Ukrainians are stupid to fall for this joke. And then this tragedy. I'm not going to spend time on it, but this is sad. Today, the head of the presidential administration in Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, said that our task is to make sure that not only the current generation of Russians, but their children and grandchildren will pay. 8 hours later, Alexander Dugin's daughter Daria was killed. Guys, we are dealing with monsters there in the Ukraine, and the West is padding them up, supporting them, providing for them, and giving them arms and ammunition and money. And this is what they do. And then we've got this from Patrick Lancaster. Ukraine is 100% breaking international law and the Geneva Convention by making it a crime punishable by 15 years in prison to receive or distribute Russian humanitarian aid in Russian-controlled territory of the Ukraine-Russia war zone. This is absolute madness, and I have spoken about it in the previous Skidmarks, where they don't want the people to take humanitarian aid from the Russians, but they provide nothing. So those people must just crawl into their basements and die. And then I've also talked about this in a previous Skidmark. The chemical substance proper was supplied in November. A 300 kilogram container of this warfare agent used as a spray was brought to Mariupol. The poisonous substance was then moved to the Kharkov region. And this is in connection with that story of the Russian soldiers that showed signs of poisoning. And then there's this image. It may have well been a what a fuck, but it's not. Comforting to know that China has amassed the largest navy in the world, while we focus on race, gender, and which cartoon character could offend. Sleep well. It is actually a tragedy. And then we get to Sleepy Joe. The draft law on American support to the Balkans in the alleged fight against corruption, support by both Republicans and Democrats, aims to introduce sanctions to anyone from Serbia who cooperates with Russia and China or defends Serbs in Kosovo and Bosnia. Now read through that, think about that, and then say fuck USA, because they are forever meddling everywhere. And then we've got this, and I wonder how the American population feels about that. Biden admin released extra $800 million in military aid to Ukraine. Joe Biden could sign off another package for Kiev as early as Friday, according to Reuters. The president is reportedly set to transfer surplus weapon stockpiles through what's known as the President Drawdown Authority, amid what Washington sees as a potential nuclear crisis. Biden has been criticized recently for weakening the US and fueling conflict in Ukraine by the Republican Paul Gosar, as many become more vocal about domestic crisis and need of support. Biden feels fuck all for those people in America that are dying of cold and hunger and whatever. He doesn't feel anything for them. He's only focused on the Ukraine and protecting his investment there. Russia has repeatedly warned that the United States' involvement in the resistance to the special military operation in Ukraine is putting it on the brink of becoming a party to the conflict, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov says. And this is serious. and people should take note of it. And then we've got this. Claims to be Scott Ritter. I'm not so sure. Couldn't confirm or show because I know Scott's Twitter account has been disabled. The US would never allow except a strong, independent, free Europe that is friendly with Russia, as that would destroy the US economy overnight. Too much investment capital, wealth and bright talent minds would flock there literally overnight. And that is so true. And then I'm not going to read this whole thing, it's just US has serious problems with Russia's sponsor of terrorism. The State Department has been quietly approaching congressional officers warning that designating Russia a state sponsor of terrorism could thwart the Ukrainian grain deal and impact Washington's remaining economic ties with Moscow. And this is how that works. They will sanction everything as long as it doesn't hurt the US. But fuck the rest of the world. US announces new $775 million military aid package to Ukraine, including munitions for HIMARS. Well, I hope the American population is happy and they are well fed and they don't have any income problems. And they can cope with the inflation and they have enough food. Because your President Biden is a big supporter of that WEF principle. You will own nothing and be happy. You will be hungry and be happy. There's more about that military aid package. Ammunition for HIMARS, 16 105 howitzers with 36,000 shells, 15 Sky Eagle drones, armed missiles to target radar, TOW anti-tank systems, 1,000 javelins and NASAMS air defense systems. And I want to make a few comments on that. That 36,000 shells will last a half a day because the Russians are firing between 60 and 120,000 shells. A slap in the face as 3 out of 4 middle-class Americans report not being able to cope with the soaring cost of living as inflation keeps on soaring. The US continues to throw obscene money at Kiev, as Ukraine Support Tracker reveals, the US being their most generous supporter, which may surely sting the regular American, as US Secretary of State Blinken announced Washington assistance to Kiev exceeds $10 billion, while up to 40 million Americans report to be living on dire poverty. And that is what the American population has allowed to develop. This band of untouchable cretins sitting there in the shithouse and having full control over their lives. And then we've got this. US kills 1 million Iraqis. Saudis kill 400,000 Yemeni with UK-US weapons. Yet you're okay with that because that's how you roll, in deep ignorant shit. This is what you support. Zelensky, thousands of Ukrainians disappeared and murdered. Guys, that story there is rotten to the core. And then we get to the warafak. And this is actually a nice warafak. And you can just look at it and smile. This is Sarah. She is 45 years old. She has 2 children. And she has never exercised a day in her life. Yet she eats anything she wants and stays up until 3 a.m. drinking beer. What's her secret? No secret. Sarah is the one in the upper right corner of the picture. And on that note, I hope you had a smile. Remember to subscribe and like. Guys, the likes are important. I see many views, but not that many likes. If you don't like this shit, write it in the comments down here. Tell me what you want. Thank you for your support.